we did do a show earlier today going over spring break and Bloodsport and some of the news items, and we did discuss this, but I think it is worth reiterating because it did get a lot of attention today, and that is Andreas Hale of ESPN, who was tweeted out that he was denied credentials and blocked access. He stated that neither I nor ESPN has been told why. You can speculate on the reasons, but if you want answers, ask WWE. Let me know what they tell you. This tweet has been retweeted 3.2 thousand times and like 20,000 times. So this has gotten a lot of coverage. And on a day when, if you were Googling WWE ESPN, I think this would be a high volume day for people searching that. This inevitably would be coming up in your search results as well. Like, this got a lot of attention because of Andreas's obvious affiliation with ESPN. He is based in Las Vegas. And yeah, there really hasn't been any more than that. We have reached out to ESPN. They were not commenting on this. We did not hear back from WWE. It was interesting because, we are in an era where they've removed the press conferences. So, I mean, you could certainly look at this way. Like, every outlet has their sort of mandate of what they are going to cover at these events. Like, you and I have discussed this many times. Like, there is basically no reason for us to attend a show like this as media at this point, beyond you're there to watch it. It's like, for those of you that have never been in like a press box at these WrestleManias, like there's week events like where you can go and do your interviews and such, but night of, it's not like you're getting interview opportunities. The press conferences are gone. Like, you are basically there to watch the show in essence. So with the press conferences gone, obviously this is not going to get addressed by WWE. And it's one where I look at this one as like, what is ESPN's role in all of this? Like, in terms of a partner of WWE, I mean, that is one area where you would think like WWE has to work with this entity. And I do kind of look at ESPN here about like, do they back their guy here in Andreas Hale?
Yeah. Well, going back all the way back to maybe when this initial deal was announced, I believe it was Brandon Thurston who questioned one of the heads of ESPN about whether or not this would provide any sort of conflict. And I believe the
Church
ESPN
and state
said something to the effect of church and state. And that seems to be maybe the way WWE may be handling this. Like maybe being close friends, obviously, with their broadcast partner and providing all the access they want for promotion of their events, but restricting access to the journalistic arm of ESPN, which is a very fascinating sort of like direction. I mean, in all of this, they've only bought for themselves incredibly negative press, at least to a large section of this demographic. So I question that decision, obviously. But whether or not this indicates any sort of further separation of maybe ESPN, the journalistic side, from the broadcaster side, as far as WWE goes, I think those are legitimate questions.
Yeah, to me, this is a news story. Like, I don't even know how ESPN would necessarily cover this, if they would at all cover this. Like, I would hope ESPN at least puts out a statement, and we didn't get one today. I think you kind of have to, and this is the weird spot ESPN places itself in, and it's not just with WWE, but with the NFL, where now there's like a minority ownership stake. It's like where it becomes very, very difficult, I would say, in this modern age, if you are working for a corporate media entity and you ultimately are serving multiple masters. You want to have a news arm, but you're also in business with these companies that their priority is not being in business with ESPN for journalism's sake. It is maybe that is an arm of ESPN's business, but it is not going to be necessarily the driver when it comes to these multi-million-dollar television rights deals that they have with various leagues, with places like WWE, for instance. But if you're going to be a news outlet, like, this is kind of a test of, do you stand up for your guy? Do you publicly defend him? Like, Andreas he's a very good reporter. And that seems to be at the crux of this, is letter grades, essentially, is what this comes down to from last year. And the fact that, and I did look back just to see some of the coverage this week on the ESPN digital side this week, there was a really big story that they did with one of ESPN staff writers, with Paul Heyman. But generally, I mean, it's a lot of lists. It's a lot of like pieces by various ESPN staff. And outside of the Heyman piece, I did not see a whole lot of like original content for, at least in terms of interviews and such like that. That seemed to be largely for the television side, which I mean was inundated, where there was talent over their airwaves all week long. So it does seem to be like a difference between the journalism side and the on-air portion of ESPN as well. But I would imagine like there will be some stories about this on Monday. Like this got a lot of attention from like sports media types, and it circulated a lot. And the fact that this is a partner in WWE and ESPN, like that will amplify attention when you have the letters ESPN attached to it.
My feeling on it all is that this will probably still stay within the wrestling bubble, like where I feel, you know, these sort of stories just, I don't know if wrestling, especially wrestling media, is taken as seriously outside of, you know, our space, right? By, you know, like maybe larger sort of like mainstream sports entities. And that to me will make me feel like WWE won't care about the story as much, or at least they won't care enough to change any sort of direction. I also feel like ESPN will probably err on the side of making sure this partnership is, you know, sort of amicable rather than contentious over news pieces on the website.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't have a great insight into, or at least like feel good about just the state of some of these media positions, where I think like the indirect message here is that if you're someone within ESPN that is writing about WWE, if you're writing about NFL, it's like, don't go for topics that are going to disenfranchise you from the league you're covering, because at the end of the day, ESPN may not have your back. And if you cannot be sent to events to cover, is that harming your own value to that specific news outlet? And that's sure. Where you're in. It's like, who are you ultimately working for? And that becomes very difficult to do journalism when you're with one of these corporate entities that have a high stakes relationship with these leagues that you are covering. And ultimately, they are the ones that can command this power. And ESPN has a lot of power too. And that's the interesting dynamic here.
I guess my question is, not to make this topic too long, because this is a WrestleMania review, of course. We will get to it. But my question is, if you're ESPN, why do journalism at this point? What does journalism, what's the merit in even doing journalism?
Well, it's at this stage, I think it's very hard for them to do journalism in the sense of how deep you're going to go into things. Like when there was the concussion, like the heaviest of concussion issues a decade ago, and how much they were going to cover. But that was considered like, this is ultimately like a service for our audience that is that we can both it can be profitable through our investigative series that we broadcast, and that this is ultimately a news entity. But as more and more, like, you are getting away from journalism, and if journalism is going to cause you all of these headaches with your partners, it becomes that sort of fork in the road of, what are you doing this for? And it's, unfortunately, journalism can be very expensive, and it also brings with you a lot of these types of problems. And I think when you are trying to mix the two, where you are both league partner and you are doing journalism, I think that's a very dangerous mix, and it's only intensified over this last decade. And this is the point where we have a lot of these major news outlets that are connected in some way, shape, or form. And we have talked about this with ESPN. We have talked about this with front office sports right now. The same thing, like these business relationships with these entities that you are covering, and it gives you the appearance of a conflict. And in this instance, it feels like one person who opted to cover the Janelle Grant story and give a C letter grade is facing retribution over that and not being credentialed. That would be the theory that you would draw for this, because WWE did not give him a reason for why he was not credentialed.
We could talk about this beyond sports. We could talk about this with Skydance and CBS and, soon to come CNN. right? These are questions that are bigger than maybe just professional wrestling when we're talking about entities just owning basically everything.
Yes, it is a common trait among all of these giant companies that will be the first ones to, when it comes to politics, discuss freedom of speech and how important it is, and we should be allowed to say anything. But somehow that never does apply when you are the one that maybe is the focus of reporting, for instance. I did think it was important that we do discuss this because this was a notable story, and I'm curious if this just becomes like, as you said, this is kind of contained. Well, it's wrestling. It's not going to get that attention. We saw the opposite a decade ago with Ariel Helwani, where it became a really big story the Monday after UFC 199 and a quick 180 that the UFC took in turn. Like you and I were discussing this afternoon, this idea that would they ultimately just correct this with Andreas? Because I just felt for WWE, it's like there's nothing to gain from this weekend of just other than you can do it, but do you want this attention that this one, and I say this as someone that, like, if I was in this spot, this would not get any type of attention, but because it's ESPN, it's going to get so much more attention. But ultimately there was no update. It did not appear that they reverse course here on this.
Maybe they feel confident that the amount of attention that it's getting is not enough to rock the boat enough.
And sometimes that is, unfortunately, the way these things pan out ultimately. It is WrestleMania month at postwrestling.com. Wei Ting and John Pollock go live all WrestleMania week beginning Monday, April the 13th. Sign up for the Post Wrestling Cafe and you will get live shows all week long leading into our coverage that weekend of WrestleMania 42. This month, we're also bringing you reviews of Spring Break 2 from New Orleans in 2018 and a special Patrons Pick edition of Rewind Away. Sign up now at postwrestlingcafe.com, and this month, new subscribers get 50% off for the first month. Head on over to postwrestlingcafe.com.